Hi there, it's Nicole here with a Peekaboo Panda kindness card. This is a cute little card featuring some fun stamp sets from Simon Says Stamp. I'm using the Tropical Leaves, the Cuddly Critters, and also the Uplifting Thoughts. These are three of the newer stamp sets from Simon Says Stamp from a recent release. And I've combined them here to create this framed up little circle frame with all of the greenery and then the cute little panda sticking out. To start, I am stamping the Tropical Leaves on some watercolor cardstock using Distress inks. And I'm using Lucky Clover, Twisted Citron, and Mowed Lawn Distress inks. And I'm stamping them with Distress inks, but then I'm taking a damp paintbrush and simply smoothing out that ink so that it gives a nice and finished look. Because these are solid images, the Distress ink is not going to really give you that crisp stamped image. I wanted more of that watercolor look, so by taking the paintbrush dipped in water and smoothing out that paint, it's going to give me a much nicer looking stamped image with a little touch of that watercolored kind of look, because the Distress inks do react with water. I'm going to continue to do this for several of the images in this stamp set, just using different combinations. I use the Lucky Clover for those two there, and then I was messing around. I didn't like how either of those two other leaves here, those layered leaves, turned out. I tried to stamp the lighter image first and then the darker, and I just couldn't get it lined up the way I liked it. So I went ahead and stamped the darker image first and then the lighter on top of it, and that worked out better. And again, smoothing out with that damp paintbrush is going to give a nice finished leaf. For many of my images, I have multiples. That's just going to allow me to create this really full kind of jungle type of look when I create my frame for the panda. And the greenery really is what's framing up the whole image here. That's where my whole pop of color is coming, is from these three shades of Distress ink. There are lots of great images in here, and several of them are color layering images. You could totally use some dye inks if you wanted to and layer them one on top of another to get a completely different look with maybe a little less work. Now for this long leaf image, and I will admit this is my favorite one from the stamp set, I used Mowed Lawn and Lucky Clover together. I inked up the entire thing with Mowed Lawn and then kind of did the rock and roll technique to roll on a little of the Lucky Clover and again smooth that out. I didn't particularly like how that top leaf image turned out up there, so I kind of cut out a little bit of that in the video, but I wanted to kind of leave them in there to show you just have to play with them and see what works. A lot of creating is trial and error. For this particular image, also another kind of color layering type of image, I used Twisted Citron first and then Mowed Lawn. And I'll create a couple of those. You can see that image did not look that great when I first stamped it, kind of blotchy, the darker green, the Mowed Lawn as well. But once you add a little water to that, it takes care of any of that problem. I let all of these air dry. If you were in a little bit more of a hurry, you could totally hit them with a heat tool and dry them quicker before you die cut them with the coordinating Tropical Leaves dies. Now I loved this one so much that I stamped multiples of this to kind of use here and there. I even cut them apart a little bit to get more out of them so that I could have different lengths of these kind of viney looking images around my frame. Once all of these are stamped and painted with the water to smooth out the ink, I will die cut them with the Tropical Leaves dies. And then I am ready to stamp my panda from the Cuddly Critters stamp set. One thing about the panda is, because he's not going to have a ton of coloring, I wanted to make sure he was nice and crisp and dark black. I'm going to use my Misty so that I can stamp him in the exact same spot several times and I'll show you why. I'm inking up the image the first time with my intense black ink, and I'm going to stamp that there, and you can see it's not a crisp black image. It's kind of faded. I inked it up again, stamped it over again. It's so much darker. I even went a third time. Perfect. So when I show it to you there, you can see he's nice and crisp and black. Looks much, much better than when you stamp it one time. And with the Misty, you can stamp it in the same place as many times as you need to. There's just really nothing else you can use that's going to give you that same kind of look. I mean, it's just phenomenal. I love the Misty for that. I did add a little touch of Copic coloring to my Panda with a little E000, that's a floral white color, and then R00, which is a pinkish white for the cheeks. And anywhere that I needed to kind of blend that back into the white area of the Panda, I'm using the colorless blender. It's not actually for blending, but it will kind of hide and smooth those coloring lines from those two marker colors so that they don't look as harsh against the white of the Panda. So I maybe got a little too aggressive with my colorless blender. I did go back in and have to pinken up his cheeks just a little bit. I'm using some wire cutters to cut apart the coordinating die for the Panda. I'll tape that in place and run it through my Big Shot die cutting machine. For the background of my card, I'm using the Lawn Fawn A2 size stitched rectangle die. I'm going to die cut that twice from smooth white cardstock. And then from the first rectangle, I'm going to use the largest stitched circle die from Simon Says Stamp. This has stitch lines on both sides of the die line, so it's going to keep that stitching line. And then I'm going to take my other rectangle and I'm going to line it up right behind this one so that I can perfectly align my second circle inside there. And I'm going to run that through again. I didn't even bother to remove my first rectangle. It ran through just fine. Go ahead and take my Post-it tape off, remove those inside circles. I can save those for another project. And then I've got some great layered circles here. So you can see that's going to allow me to tuck my greenery kind of here and under each layer. So on the base layer, which is going to be my card base, and then each of the other two layers. On the top layer with the larger size circle opening, I'm going to stamp a greeting from the Uplifting Thoughts stamp set. It's one of my favorite greetings from that stamp set. It reads, "Kindness can change the world." I love that. And then I am going to attach these layers one on top of another on my card base. So starting with the circle layer with the smaller circle opening, I'm completely covering the back with some foam adhesive. I will peel all that off and attach it right to my card base. There's really no need to add an additional piece of paper to the card base. The white of my top fold card base from Simon Says Stamp will serve as my base layer. So there is that one. Now I want this circle opening to be slightly raised or dimensional as well. So again, going to take my foam adhesive, completely cover the back of this panel as well. Have to be a little trickier with it because the opening is just wide enough that the entire width of the foam adhesive is not going to fit all the way around. So I'm just trimming it in half. That kind of gets more out of the adhesive anyway. And I'm going to line that up around all four sides and attach that right on top of the other frame. Now comes the fun part. Once I have this frame on top of the other one, I can start putting it all together. That I had to kind of redo my foam adhesive along the top. It buckled for whatever reason, so I'm just going to put another piece there real quick. Piece it together, pull off all that backing paper. This is where you can take all of those different elements now, all of these stamped greenery and the Panda, and fit it all together to create a cute little peekaboo type of scene. You can see both of those layers of frames now have some nice dimension. And I'm going to want to put the Panda about there. So what I like to do is, because he's not going to fit exactly the way I want him to, you can trim anything that you need to. I trimmed off a little of that greenery. I'm going to start with that and tuck that in between those two circles. I'm going to trim off a little piece of the panda as well. He is going to actually be flush with that background layer of the card. And now all it is some simple layering to get everything positioned right where I want it to go and make sure I get it really nice and full so that it really kind of looks like a little panda peeking through the greenery here. Some of the pieces are going to be on the base layer, some will be in between the two circle layers, and there's even going to be a piece along the front edge, just however it looks the most natural. Some pieces tucked behind the panda, some obviously in front, just kind of however you can make it look the best. This has a little portion of the leaf over the front, the top edge of that front circle. I've cut some of these smaller vine pieces in half so I can use both pieces of those. Here's a little piece along the front edge, which looks great, I think. I'm going to even tuck a few more of these. These were the individual leaves from the Tropical Leaves stamp set. I went back and added those a little bit later because I thought I needed a few more smaller pieces. I even stamped another one of these kind of leafy, or I don't know, palm leaves maybe looking images. And I think the combination of the three colors of Distress ink really adds to the whole design of the card. I think it's much better than just the two colors, which I was going to just stick with Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn to begin with, but I like the addition of that Lucky Clover ink. So I'm going to finish up with just a couple more pieces here. And finally, I am going to take some glossy accents and go over the eyes and the nose on the panda. And that's just going to make the eyes and nose really pop, especially since you don't see much of him. You just see him peeking through there. Nice little finishing touch. And that is going to finish off this really cute Peekaboo Panda window card. Thanks for joining me today for this card showcasing lots of Simon Says stamps and dies, as well as some Lawn Fawn dies. The supplies I've used to create this card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards showcasing Simon Says stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Please subscribe for weekly videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.